Remember, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder treason and plot. For I see no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. If you've seen V for Vendetta, you've heard that rhyme before. But did you know there's more to the poem? It goes on to tell the story of one of the most ambitious assassination attempts in history. A caper that came so close to wiping out an entire government that it sparked a national holiday. You heard of the 4th of July, Cinco de Mayo, and Bastille Day. They're all patriotic celebrations of governmental overthrow. But what if that never happened in your country? What do you celebrate? The answer is Bonfire Night, sometimes called Guy Fawkes Day. With hot dogs, alcohol, fireworks, bonfires, and fairs, it's a hell of a lot of fun every November 5th. But there's one part that hints at its darker past, when a straw man effigy is tossed on the bonfire to burn to ashes. To find the origin of the holiday, you have to go back in time some 600 years. It all stems from Henry VIII, who required that everyone in England convert to Protestantism, just so he could get Anne Boleyn between the sheets. The knock-on effect of that was years of religious conflict between Catholics and Protestants. 70 years and one Queen Elizabeth later, James of Scotland is the new crowned head of the still Protestant United Kingdom. But some of the old lords are still Catholic at heart and want to see it go back that way. The name most people associate with the events of the Gunpowder Plot is Guy Fawkes, but he's really just the trigger man. The mastermind was Robert Catesby, a prominent noble and ancestor of Jon Snow on Game of Thrones, also known as Kit Harington, who actually played Catesby in a recent adaptation about the events. Catesby put together a crack team of leaders, fighters, and explosive experts, Ocean's 11 style, all for one of history's biggest capers. To kill the King of England and every member of Parliament and put the 9-year-old princess on the throne as a new puppet ruler of a Catholic state headed by the conspirators. The snag? The king and both houses of the UK's government never meet in the same place at the same time. Well, almost never. See, on 7th February in 1605, everyone would gather together in the House of Lords in London for the official state opening of England's Parliament, including the king and most of the royal family. The plan? Blow it all up. Using a house in London, barrels of gunpowder would be smuggled into the city. Then each night it would be rowed across the Thames and put into a rented room next door to the Parliament. And if this sounds impossible, remember that London wasn't always the bustling metropolis that it is today. But then came the hard part. They would need to dig a tunnel all the way to the House of Lords, past shops, houses, and lots of little old ladies with nothing to do but put their noses in things. But even if they got there, they couldn't exactly hide barrels of gunpowder under butt cushions. The digging was going well, but then they started to hear noises in the tunnels. Someone else was down there. Fawkes was sent out to investigate. It turned out to be a little old lady clearing her supplies out of a leased basement space, the exact basement that the conspirators were tunneling towards. In a brilliant stroke of chance, they were able to rent the exact location they were trying to plant their bombs. It's a good thing that a healthy dose of money can solve most problems. Luckily, the House of Lords was converted from a palace built in the old style, with a massive undercroft beneath the main building used to store firewood and supplies. Years of palace life had left it full of broken bits, odds, and ends, so a few more dirty barrels wouldn't go amiss. Guy Fawkes was a proper hard man, a Yorkshire boy who'd spent 10 years working as a mercenary for Catholic armies in the Netherlands and Spain, making himself such an expert in war he even picked up a foreign moniker, Guido Fawkes. And as the man had saltpeter in his veins, he was put in charge of the explosives for the plot. For this job, he reckoned 20 barrels ought to do it. By his figuring, he'd take out the basement, the chamber, the walls, and then blow the roof off for good measure. But when he saw the massive undercroft, he put in 16 more, making it an even 2.5 tons to do the deed. Turns out, it was more than enough. But there was a complication. A bad batch of plague hit London. The opening of Parliament was postponed to July, but then things got worse and it was pushed back again, this time to 5th November. The conspirators started getting squirrely. An anonymous letter had been given to the friend of a member of the House of Lords, telling him to lay low and not to come to the opening of Parliament. Someone was having an attack of conscience. With their names on the leases around Parliament and a big pile of bang in the basement, it wouldn't take a genius to connect 1 and 2. And to make it worse, the wait and the long, wet London weather spoiled the powder, and it all had to be replaced. Somehow they managed it without being noticed, and to keep people from sniffing around, they piled firewood and coal over top of it, disguising it in the basement. Word got back to the conspirators that a letter had been sent out. They were blown, but Parliament was still happening, and they were in too deep to back out now. And with a fast boat waiting in the harbor, all they needed was to put a torch to tinder and hightail it to the continent if it went south. So Catesby and the rest headed for the Midlands, armed to the teeth. When the powder went off, they'd start a revolt and set themselves at the top. Guy Fawkes took a pocket watch off one of them before they left, set his fuses for the opening ceremony, and found himself a comfortable spot in the dark cellar beneath Parliament. But what they didn't count on was the king. The letter reached James of England on Friday, 1st November, and he wasn't about to ignore it. His own dear old dad had been blown to bits by a gunpowder assassination, so he wasn't taking any chances. He sent his men to search Parliament. They turned up nothing. All they found was a serving man and a bunch of coal. Feeling the pressure on him, Fawkes put on his hat, cloak, and spurs, ready to hit the road and ride as soon as the fuses were lit. He timed them out. Slow matches burned at 1 foot per hour, and Parliament opened at 8. So at midnight, he snipped off 8 foot of cord and ran it to the barrels, then lit his lantern to make ready. But a light appeared in the stairs to the undercroft. Armed guards with torches surrounded Fawkes. He was nicked, and being a good Catholic boy, he went quietly and didn't even blow the gunpowder. After all, it was a fair cop. When they asked him what he was about, he didn't even lie. He laid it plain and true: to blow up the king in Parliament. Those words sparked a hunt across the nation. The king knew Guy Fawkes couldn't have acted alone, but he wasn't talking, and a life-on campaign had left Guy Fawkes tough as nails. The king needed whatever the man knew now, so he agreed to put the question to him properly, with manacles on the rack. To everyone's astonishment, he lasted 2 full days before he broke. And before you call the man a snitch, take a look at his signature on the day he was captured, and then after 2 days of torture. Word got out fast. Catesby and his merry band in the north raided an arms warehouse at Warwick Castle, intent on arming a sympathetic mob, but nobody showed up. And then, just to add insult to injury, it started to rain. Hoping someone might eventually join them, they decided to dry some powder by the fire just in case. It literally blew up in their faces. Blinded and humiliated, they resolved to wait for the king's men at Holbeg House. The Sheriff of Worcestershire obliged them with 200 men and opened up on their hideout with a volley of gunfire on the morning of 8th November. 4 of them were killed in the opening volley, including Catesby. 4 more, though, survived to face the king's justice, a fate none of them were looking forward to. After 10 weeks of spirited interrogation, anyone who had ever even talked to the men had been pulled in for questioning, but the time had come to dispense justice. The head interrogator wrote it down as, quote, hung to death halfway between heaven and earth as unworthy of both, their genitals to be cut off and burnt before their eyes, and their bowels and heart then removed. They would then be decapitated, and the dismembered parts of their bodies displayed and left for crows. On a cold day in late January, they were led to the gallows to begin. Crowds had gathered to watch. Guy Fawkes was made to mount the steps first, but he wasn't about to give them the pleasure of a show. When they went to slip the noose around his neck, he threw himself head first from the scaffold, breaking his own neck, and robbing the assembled of their sport. But they hung and quartered his corpse anyway, just for good measure. Keyes, another conspirator, tried the same trick, but he ended up dangling and kicking on the rope. So they cut him down and led him to the quartering block, still alive. The 3 remaining men were castrated, disemboweled, and then cut up while still conscious. Their parts sent to the edges of the empire as a warning. To celebrate the occasion, the Parliament reconvened and passed the Thanksgiving Act, creating an annual church celebration with sermons and prayers on 5th November, marked with bells, bonfires, and fireworks. Old clothes were stuffed with rags and newspapers and fitted with a mask, an effigy, sometimes a fox, that children then threw into the bonfire that Fawkes managed to escape. A tradition that continues even today, all to celebrate the day that England wasn't blown up. So the next time you're in Britain on the 5th of November, spare a penny for the guy, and a thought for the bonfires waiting on him. And as always, remember the 5th of November. Gunpowder treason and plot, for I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Guy Fawkes, 'twas his intent to blow up the king and the parliament, 70 barrels of powder below, poor old England to overthrow. By God's providence he was catched, with a dark lantern and a burning match. So holler boys, let the bells ring, and holler boys, God save the king. Thanks for watching.